obviously that's in-person teaching. So teaching kids in the classroom. And so over that course of time and, over a decade, obviously technology has already been infusing itself into our instruction quite a bit. So while this was unexpected, that's when you're talking about gratitude. That's one thing I would say I'm very grateful for right now, is that we have all of these technology platforms to really leverage to connect with everybody. So like most teachers, probably when this all happened, it happened very quickly. And so that created a lot of stress, a lot of questions, uncertainty. And so for me, being a homeroom teacher, I teach an inclusion class with a co-taught class of 25 students. And then I also am the academic integration specialist for third grade. So there's 6 classes. It was really important to me to make sure that in that day that we had to prepare for all of this to happen, we were all on the same page and we all had lessons that were really clear for the kids to follow. We had showed the kids how to engage with us, and we were ready to go both with our team planning and with our students for instruction.
That is so awesome. So talk to us a little bit more about what that process looks like. So here's one of the things I've heard a lot is from a lot of teachers is, especially with their younger students, and you teach elementary school, and you also oversee a team of third grade teachers. And just like the attention span, how do you transition to a virtual online class and keep so many kids' attention and still ensure that they're all learning? So talk to us just a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think that learning in the virtual space really exacerbates all the issues you might have in an in-person class. So you really have to be mindful about attention span and what that is for your age range. And it's a lot less than what we think it is. And I think that teachers' nature is to give a whole lot and think, oh, well, maybe they'll catch it somewhere, instead of being like, okay, how can I plan a 10-minute lesson that really gets at what I'm doing? So that's what I focused on, is quality over quantity, and really focusing on engagements that are purposeful, that are things that are relevant to what kids are doing, what they're interested in, and structuring it like that. So, and I think we'll get to this later when we talk about equity, but making sure that you have a balance of both synchronous engagements that kids are doing together at the same time, and asynchronous, where kids are able to log on whenever they have time. And so I think, like a lot of teachers, we are using Zoom, and so we're logging on there about 3 times a week, and that's something that has been definitely a learning curve to learn how to really maximize that time.
Yeah, so let me just pause right there, and let's see if there are any folks who are current teachers, who are parents, who may have elementary school students that some of what you're saying may be resonating with, or even school leaders out there who are just trying to listen and see from a teacher's perspective at another school what this actually looks like. So for those of you just joining us, welcome. We're so happy to have you. And tell us your role and where you're logging in from. Today's topic is teaching on the front lines of education, and just hearing from a teacher's perspective, what's happening behind the scenes, what has worked, what hasn't worked. So far, Anne has shared that she teaches third grade elementary school. She's also very well versed in just learning and pedagogy. She oversees a team of third grade teachers. And the biggest thing that she has said so far is quality over quantity. I think teachers ultimately, they just want to get it right. A lot of teachers are type A. They're like, hey, we want to have, and so they sometimes end up, especially under stress, we end up overloading kids with a ton of work. And I think people are starting to realize, scale back, let's scale back. Less is more, and let's make sure that we have that quality piece as opposed to quantity. What are your thoughts? Tell us if you're watching this right now. What do you think? What questions do you also have for Anne that you'd like to know from either a parent perspective, a teacher perspective, a school leader question as well? So go ahead, Anne. So the next thing, let's talk about, you talked about quality over quantity. What else have you found in this experience that has helped you and your team maybe talk about some challenges that you all have seen happen as well and have had to either overcome or are still experiencing.
Yeah, I think that this experience really showed us, you know, teachers already know you have to vet all the resources that you're using, but this even more so, like the videos, watching them all the way out. If you're going to ask your students to take their time at home to watch it, spending the time to watch them all the way out, and then thinking about how much time it's taking. And making sure that those engagements, I think you said, are more so experiential. And, oh, you have a question? And using the
I have like a thought. I'm totally like a
yeah.
kid in class, like, oh, I have a thought. And
Yeah, making sure that instead of seeing it as a negative thing, how can you make this an opportunity with the learning? So for instance, we were doing measurement in math, capacity in math. And so instead of just having them go through some of the ed tech platforms and answering multiple choice questions or things like that, we had them do a scavenger hunt. So they were going in their house and finding examples of things that could be measured in grams, things that could be measured in kilograms, and then even on the Zoom doing some experiments with capacity and looking at containers, and students are able to engage in the Zoom, which container do they think would contain more water, and then doing that experiment and letting them do some stuff like that that they can readily do at home. And it's really a great opportunity to make the learning relevant because they're in their most comfortable environment. So that's been really successful. But like you said, it is a learning curve because you kind of have to pull back from using some of the resources that you're really used to using that may be more so skill practice, and moving away from that to things where kids are actually engaging.
So Anne, you talked about like the transition, obviously you're using Zoom. And I want us to get like real right now also, because there are a lot of schools who are getting ready to transition to Zoom. And I would like for you to just speak on what I'm hearing from a lot of teachers is how do you keep kids engaged in Zoom? What are the things that we need to be looking out for when we have kids in our Zoom classroom? You know, because they're not used to it, right? So what are those things to look out for, and what are some pieces of advice? And just really quick, I just want to share couple of questions. Are you pre-recording any content? We're not pre-recording any content, but all of this content is being recorded, and it's being uploaded to our YouTube channel. And we'll also be sharing that out in the coming weeks. It is.
I think they meant for the instruction, and that is no, not yet. Like some teachers are doing that where they're pre-recording a lesson and then their students watch it. Yeah, so that is something that we, like I shared that I teach the special ed class, so that's something that we've done, especially for accommodations. So if students are doing something that involves independent reading, doing pre-recording read alouds of the lesson is something that we've done. But so far, the lessons have been, the new content has been delivered in Zoom, which is recorded. So I think that's that question. But about the Zoom, I do have several thoughts about that because you're right. Yeah. So in Zoom, you know, it's definitely a new medium. So my first tip is to just let students explore, just like any manipulative or any new experience. Kids are, if they haven't been on Zoom, they're super excited to see each other. And so there is going to be talking. They're going to be so excited when someone new comes in. So I would suggest one, maybe even 2 sessions that are not instruction based, that are not structured. They're just allowing students to get on, like a meetup, letting them talk, catching up with them. Some students are even shocked, oh my gosh, I didn't realize people could see me. So that's been something really good, you know, helping them play around with the mute, the unmute. So that would be the first thing I would suggest, is give them that time to explore and be on Zoom without having to focus and learn and pay attention.
It's the same thing that we do in our classrooms, you all, right? Like we should be taking kids through like the practicing of, think about like the first few weeks of school, or when you implement a new routine or something new in your classroom, you have to take them through that practice. And that's exactly what Anne is speaking about. And then what was the next thing, Anne? We also have a question here coming up around Kahoot.
Oh, yeah. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, once you've kind of gotten into the routine of using Zoom, giving them a chance at the beginning to just stick to your normal routines. Like we do share time every morning, giving them the time when they're on Zoom to log in, share with each other. So everyone gets a chance to speak right away. And so they are kind of don't have that urge to call out. And then being very mindful if you are recording, telling them every single time, hey, we're recording this, so be mindful of your background, teach them how to mute and unmute, because kids are not in control of what's happening in their background. So making sure that you're being very sensitive to that and understanding. And then kind of decreasing your expectations too. It is certainly way more relaxed than being in school. You know, kids might be in their pajamas, they might, I've had some boys come without shirts on, which, you know, just try to focus on being happy that they're there and focusing on the instruction and keeping it short. Things like sharing the screen has been really effective for engagement and letting them jump in and participate. Things like breakout groups.
And so for those of you that don't know, who even are having a lot of Zoom calls right now, so we're on a Zoom, Anne and I are on our Zoom on a recorded Zoom call right now, and then it's a share button. So you get to share, you press share, and then you share whatever part of your screen you want to share, or you can give them access to do that. So thank you for that, Anne.
Yeah, but, and just thinking back to that question about the pre-recorded content, I haven't pre-recorded content, but I've pre-recorded directions. So we've done a couple assignments that are using platforms that kids have used. The one that's coming to mind is Adobe Spark, but I'm working with, I think I shared third graders, so 8 and 9. So sometimes they need multiple reminders, and in the class they're working together, so they have each other to help. So and the way I do it is I use Zoom with just myself, and I record the session. I'm able to share the screen, go into the different websites of the assignments, and show them literally how they will go into the Google Classroom, how they click their assignment, how they turn it in with voiceover, so they can see me explaining and then also see what they're going to do. And that's been really helpful as well.
Cool. Did we get okay, so have students been having issues with their internet connections? If so, has this been distracting for the class? And then someone said, pre-recorded direction, that makes sense. That's resonating with someone. Good morning, Rico. For those of us joining in, just tell us where you're logging in from. And then there's also the, are you finding games helpful, Kaboot question.
You said Kahoot?
Kaboot?
Kaboot. No, I'm not familiar with that.
Are there any, so let's take this question. It says, have students been having issues with their internet connections? If so, has this been distracting for the class? And then if you're not familiar with Kaboot, maybe some other games that you have found helpful, if you have done any games, or any of your colleagues implemented any games as well.
Yeah. So some kids have had challenges with internet that they've kind of emailed me about or called me or told me about, but I haven't noticed it in the Zoom being a distraction. I think that when I'm on Zoom, I look at the grid view so I can see everybody, but it hasn't been, sometimes kids will come in and out, but I don't notice it to be a major disruption. And you can even set it to where participants are on mute automatically on entering. And so if that's something that you're noticing, that could be something you could do. And that way, when people are popping in and out, there's not noise associated with it. But it is something to kind of notice.
You can control that as the host of Zoom as well. You can mute everyone, or you can choose who to unmute as well.
Yeah, because sometimes kids need help with that.
That's great. So Anne, one of the questions that I asked you yesterday was, how do you ensure, and then we'll move into just like kind of some concrete bite-sized action steps to wrap this up, but how do you ensure two things? One, that every kid is learning in a Zoom call. And then two, what have you seen in terms of like equity and distance learning? And is there anything that should be front of mind, any approaches to that?
Mm-hmm. So with the Zoom, I think that you have to kind of see it as an arc of instruction. And so if you're teaching about, and at the point we are at now, you might be reviewing skills or delivering new content. So it should be more than one Zoom planned about it. So, and you have to understand that kids, the way that they learn is different for each kid. And so their engagement is going to look different at each point they are in that arc of understanding. So I think that it's really important to plan your engagements where students are participating. You're able to call on students. Another thing that really helps with engagement is to do breakout sessions with multiple adults. So I shared that I have a co-teacher, so we're able to go into separate groups. So we have one Zoom and we do a breakout group. But if you don't have a co-teacher, you could just find a colleague.
Yeah, really quickly, Anne, for those people that are not sure where breakout rooms would be, here are breakout rooms on Zoom. So you could put your students into small groups? And I think you were going to talk about, go ahead, you keep going.
Yeah, so with, at least you can do it with the teacher or with not, but I like to have a teacher in the room to deliver that content. And so if you don't have a co-teacher, you could find a colleague and maybe you guys pair up and join each other's classes. That way you're working with smaller groups of students in those breakout sessions. And again, the time needs to be short for these Zoom sessions. So that should be something attainable to make sure that I try to do 30 minutes. So the first 10 minutes is like that community building, the share time, announcements, doing our normal shout outs, giving them an overview of what to expect. And then that second 20 minutes is breaking out into the small group, doing the instructions, practicing, having them engage, share, and then having them go off to do whatever they're doing that's related to the Zoom.
Yes, that's awesome. And last thing, talk to us about, first, share with us your demographics of the kids you're serving. And then also, we would also just love to hear from you. Just what are your thoughts on like equity and distance learning and, you know, there's urban communities, rural communities. Tell us what's front of mind and center for you.
Yeah, I am in Atlanta and I'm in a very high performing charter school. So our charter school has attracted families who have moved to the area to attend the school. So the demographics, it's about 70% Black, 30% white, and we are kind of about the 50-50 mark for, well, actually it's below 50 now for free and reduced lunch, but it's pretty heterogeneous economically as well. But many of the students do have resources, especially when you're thinking about other schools. So that's an advantage that I've experienced with doing the distant learning. My school did offer devices to students, so that's helped. But with equity, there's still a lot to consider. And I think that it's really important to not make assumptions. So no matter what demographic you're working with, don't assume that students either have devices or don't have devices, because even if they may have many resources, they might be sharing devices, their parents might be using the devices during the day, they might have a job where they have to be on the computer. So it's really important to think about that, because I know that a lot of us are concerned about how this in many ways could exacerbate current gaps, where students and families who are already the most stressed are even more stressed now. And so thinking about ways where educators, especially those of us on the front lines, how we can jump in and mitigate that as much as possible. So the number one thing I think is to just make sure that you are checking your own thinking and that making sure that it's asset-based, making sure that you are assuming best intent in every case, that you're not making assumptions, and that you are, you know, I think that teachers, especially when they're stressed, they kind of default back to what they know. And so I've heard things like, oh, like some kids are at home doing nothing. They're gonna fall so far behind. Like they're gonna get nothing out of being at home. And that's absolutely the wrong attitude. So thinking about ways that you can actually connect with students in this time, because school is definitely a power balance. And so for a lot of students and families, school, they are not empowered. School is the authority figure and they are guests there and they're expected to assimilate. And so in this environment, students and families are in an environment that they're most comfortable with. And so you can kind of go to them, and that power balance, if you are approaching it the correct way, can be in many ways decreased. And then, like I mentioned before, with structuring the lessons for equity, it's so important that you have designed your entire curriculum so students can engage asynchronously. So maybe they have a parent that works in the healthcare industry and they're not with a parent right now, and they're with a family member, or their parent is still working, and so their parent gets home at 5 o'clock and then is helping them. So making sure that they can engage in all of the lessons, even if they're not able to join in live time, they still can get in there with everybody. And yeah, those would be my main things.
So if for any of you that are just joining in or may have questions, the topic today has been teaching on the front lines, and also just teaching with equity or through the lens of equity as well. And so, Anne, thank you for highlighting the points around teachers quality over quantity. If you are a parent and not a teacher, you know, work with your teachers as well to communicate like what that experience is like for you as a parent, because everyone is just really trying to figure it out. And if it's not being brought to light in a manner that is that you're wanting to problem solve, then, you know, people are just not gonna know and not, you know, may not be open to it. So make sure that you're sharing that information. Also, and I love the details that you shared, just taking us all the way into your Zoom classes with your students and what that looks like, and the how critical it is for you to establish some norms and routines, and the small breakout rooms, and, you know, the activities that could also teachers can do with students, and keeping that time to a minimum. And then I also appreciated what you elevated around like equity and our mindset around it, right? Let's not assume that students have everything, but also be careful with assuming that our students do not have access to something or cannot achieve something because of their situation. So I heard someone here say, my school is banning us from Zoom. They're forcing Google Meet. Why is that? I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, and I think that that's important to think about, because there are a lot of privacy issues with kids, and you know, you're dealing with minors. And so I think that that's a great decision to go with the Google Meets. We've done some of that, but I think that that's a good idea. And just definitely be thinking about, especially when you're talking about equity too, making sure that you're protecting students' privacy as it relates to all this new technology. And I know that we kind of have to balance, you know, offering them rich instruction while also being mindful of things as we're learning in real time. But I think that that's good to think about that.
Yeah, that's good. So this teacher in particular, it sounds like Melena, she shared that she has no idea how to use the Google Meet, and she's worried. Any tips? So let me first share this. It's okay. Take a deep breath. Like, so many people are figuring it out. We get that we as educators and teachers, we want to do everything right. We just want to get it right for our kids. You know, it's and the thought of not only having to shift the way we do instruction, but to a completely different platform with tech, it's a lot to take in. So have grace with yourself along the way. Let your kids know, let your parents know we're shifting platforms. You know, I'm going to be figuring this out. I'm committed to figuring it out, and just work with me, right? People will work with you. Let's also we don't have to pretend like we have it all together. It's okay to say, I'm committed to figuring this out. I don't have it all yet, but I'll get there. Anne, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think I've had a teacher on my team, and they had internet issues when they had a scheduled Zoom. So just giving yourself that grace. And then she said that she's nervous about the Google Meets. I think that having your first couple just not based on instruction, just based on getting a chance to talk to each other, I think will help everybody kind of adjust to the new platform and how that's different and more relaxed. And there is going to be some background noise, and kids are excited to see each other and giving them that chance to talk. And then maybe doing a couple things to get started, just asking an easy question like, what's one word to describe what it's like to be at home, and practice going through and having everyone share, just to kind of get some of that routine going. Then once you start instruction, you kind of have some practice with that. But it is nerve-wracking, I will say. And for me, I'm not very big on videos and social media and all that. And so this kind of threw me into it because I had to get on.
Educators and even principals, and you know, there's some who have figured out the social media and have risen with the social media. I know for me that even being on the end of millennials, I was not comfortable with social media just a year and a half ago. And you know, you just kind of learn, you know, you lean into it. And I'm still learning. I'm over here holding a phone and on Zoom, trying to make sure that this is recorded. So, hey, I'm totally unapologetically like, this is me right now where I am. I haven't figured out a better way with screen.
And it's a great opportunity for kids too to lead the instruction, because kids figure out stuff. That's happened to me so often in the chat in Google Classroom, in the Zoom. Oh, Miss Martin, press this. Oh, so-and-so, you do this. So lean into that too.
So be okay with leaning into it. So one other person, you're getting a lot of questions, Anne. So, Miss Martin, how have you assisted parents with their frustrations with adjusting to this new medium? And another teacher said, I'm grateful for this. This may open the eyes for many educational decisions. Yeah. So how have you assisted parents with?
I think that's a great question, because that's something that was a big issue, and different districts have done it differently. But my school, we were in school on Friday, we were e-learning on Monday. And so there wasn't an adjustment period or anything. And people are already nervous about what's going on. So a lot of parents had a lot of anxiety and were very overwhelmed with having to help their students with all these things on top of managing all their household responsibilities. And then also parents too, for if students are independent, it's generally fine. But for those kind of bubble students who we've been working with throughout the year and who've been receiving all those supports, it in many cases is the first time that the parent really realizes firsthand what the educators have been sharing with them. You know, even if they're like supportive and partners with the school and want all those interventions for their kid, that's different than sitting with them and seeing them literally struggle through all those assignments. And so what I've done is gotten on the phone immediately. You know, when I get an email or anything, just offer to call and just say, listen, like, anything you can do right now is okay. And make sure that, you know, hopefully you're working in an environment where the expectations are very open, and, you know, grades aren't as, or grades should never be punitive, obviously, in any environment, let alone this one. So just calling parents and letting them know, like, if it's too much, like, you know, you're now the parent expert. So if you guys are stressed, take a break. I've suggested to parents who, and some parents are type A too, they want to finish all of it.
Yeah.
And so for those people too, and kids who take longer, I've suggested breaking it up into time. Like, spend 30 minutes on reading. And I give them a checklist every day of the lesson. So you might not get to everything. So if that's something that parents are stressed out with, have them look at time versus task. And so, and again, with the quality over quantity, spend an hour really engaging. And if you don't finish, then you just move on for the day. That's been something that's helpful. And just reassuring parents that they're not going to, because I think parents now are like, oh my gosh, my student's going to fail because of me. And so just letting them know, no, like, that's not going to happen. Like,
that's really important. Just like that reassurance for, you know, parents, like, no one is out there to be a terrible parent, right? Like,
yeah.
Everyone is just doing their best with what they have. And we just have to operate from that place. And when we operate from that place, like, you'd be surprised, we let go of a lot of stress and a lot of expectations and frustration and disappointment. So
yeah, but call them and reassure them, and, you know, let them know that it's okay.
Don't shy away from that. Some teachers, let me tell you, some teachers don't like to call parents.
Yeah, and like I think you should. I work with other teachers too, and so I've gotten texts from my teammates. Oh my gosh, look at screenshot, look at this email, and kind of my motto during this time is just kill them with kindness. Assume, and we were talking about this yesterday. Assume everyone's doing their best, and even if, you know, people have an attitude or exacerbated, if you just lay it on them with the niceness and the kindness, they soften so quickly.
People just need that though. Like,
yeah.
Don't. And here's what I want us to remember, and this doesn't just apply to this live ed talk or just this profession or just the professional world. People's reactions are just a reflection of where they are in life. People's reactions are a reflection of where they are in life. So a parent who is upset or who is, you know, frustrated or coming at you in some kind of way, it has nothing to do with you, right? If they choose to operate in that way. So just notice that they are stressed, that they're maybe coming at you in a wrong way, and, you know, have grace and just work with them. And give yourself some space if you need some space. Don't engage with someone when you're upset and when your emotions are high.
Yeah. Another thing I would recommend too is giving their names to, if you have a counselor or assistant principal or principal, other support staff in the building that maybe could give them a phone call and just some encouragement too. is something that's a good idea.
Thank you, Anne. All right. Thank you to all of our followers, our IG tribe, our listeners.